In the desert, agents Stipp and Lubinsky visit a Mexican couple. After scanning their home for any possible danger, they try to talk to the husband, who only keeps repeating the word, rebirth. He gives the agents his rosary, but doesn't answer any questions. His wife says he used to be blind, yet he isn't anymore. Then she takes them to the spot where something fell from the sky and started all this. Meanwhile, mechanic David is visiting the grave of his dead wife, telling her that their daughter will be visiting soon. Afterward, he goes to work, and while driving, he listens to the news to know the state of the ongoing war. At the garage, the mechanics are doing nothing because the current economic crisis means they barely have any clients. David doesn't want to give up, but his boss announces it's over. Suddenly, veteran Zach shows up looking for a job, and David has to turn him down. That night, David goes to the bar and hears some edgy man insult the American military. Zach gets irritated and calls him out, so the guy takes Zach's drink and follows him outside. Knowing that the man is playing dirty, David follows them out and discovers Zach has been surrounded by a whole gang. Two guys hold him while the edgy man beats him up. They don't stop when David asks them to, so he joins the fight, but he and Zach end up easily overpowered and bleeding. In the struggle, the gang accidentally pulls off Zach's fake leg and realizes he's disabled, so they leave. David gives Zach his leg back and offers a ride. After a tense conversation, Zach is dropped at the rehab center where he lives. Then David goes home and realizes he's late for his birthday. His daughter Annabelle has been waiting for the cake, but she also has bad news. She was forced to drop out of college because David's last 2 payments didn't go through. David promises to get the money soon, but Annabelle doesn't want him to overwork and ends the conversation with an engraved watch as a gift. David wants to drink to forget, but there's no more alcohol in the house. He leaves in the car to buy more, and he's shocked to see a fiery ball in the sky quickly falling toward the road. David tries to move the car away only to end up falling off the road into a forest ditch, landing upside down. After a few minutes, a bleeding David regains consciousness and sees someone walking nearby. Ignoring his pain, he starts following the woman, who whispers his name in a familiar voice. However, the wounds are too much, and David keeps on falling. The next morning, Annabelle discovers her father isn't back and gets worried when he doesn't answer his phone. She calls the police, but they tell her 24 hours must pass to consider it a missing person. Next, she stops at the garage, but they haven't seen him either. Annabelle continues to search the area and eventually finds the crashed vehicle in the ditch, but David isn't around. Night falls, but Annabelle doesn't give up, using a flashlight to search every inch of the forest. When her batteries run out, she goes back to her car and begins losing hope as she cries. However, when she starts the car, the lights reveal David standing in the middle of the road. Later at the hospital, David wakes up to see the same woman speaking to him. Meanwhile, the doctor tells Annabelle they've found something strange. The records say David donated a kidney to his wife before she died, which Annabelle confirms. However, the new x-rays indicate he has both kidneys now. David is allowed to go home but can't stop seeing the woman everywhere, so he decides to sit outside on his wife's old chair and remembers what happened last night. While following the mysterious person, David fell into a crater where the object from the sky was glowing. Suddenly, the object grew vines that grabbed David's arm. After Annabelle falls asleep, David looks out the window and hears his name again. He follows the noise into the forest, where he's shocked to reunite with his wife Jane. They share a hug and sweet words before Jane makes him have a vision. There's a nuclear war coming, so David must build something to protect their daughter. When David goes home and sees on the news that the war is getting worse, he decides to go to the barn and start making plans. In the meantime, Stipp and Lubinsky are arguing with their boss, who thinks looking for alien rocks is a waste of time when there's a war going on. They already received orders to shut the mission down, and they ignored it because Stipp believes alien technology may help them win the war. Afterward, the agents go to the lab and receive bad news. The specimen they brought from the desert is dead. It seems these aliens can't survive under strong heat. Desperate for clues, Stipp orders the doctor to open the Mexican man up, and Lubinsky to inform the wife that her husband died of cardiac arrest. The next day, Annabelle keeps crying while watching family videos at home. David retrieves Jane's old truck and drives to the rehab center to offer Zach a job. Both men go to the forest, and David leaves Zach in charge of the inch before going to the crater. To his surprise, grass has started to grow around the alien object. He connects the winch to it to drag it out, and Zach helps him get it on the back of the track, needing the strength of 2 men to lift it. Suddenly, Zach pulled his hand back, because he felt something weird. When David returns home, he spends the whole day in the barn building and planning, which is noticed by his daughter. In the evening, David finally enters the house and discovers Annabelle has gone through her mother's things. She intends to put half in the barn and send the other half to charity, hoping this could help them get a fresh start. However, David disagrees, saying they don't need to pretend Jane isn't there to move on. Meanwhile, at the rehab center, Zach feels something strange and checks his leg stump, only to discover a weird protuberance growing on it. The next day, Zach and his fellow veterans join an anti-war protest in front of an army office. While the cops try to untie a chained protester, a man passes by and spits on Jim's face, calling him a traitor. Jim freaks out and tries to get in a fight, only to fall off his wheelchair. Zach jumps in to defend him, so the police finally stop everything and send everyone home. As Zach walks away, he notices his leg stump is bleeding. At the barn, David discovers that the alien object has received some damage and realizes the sunlight caused it. Suddenly Zach shows up, demanding to know what happened to him. Moments later, Annabelle arrives and sees the blood in the front yard. Panicking, she rushes inside and finds her father tending to Zach on the couch. She thinks they should take him to the hospital, but David refuses and uncovers Zach's lap, revealing his leg is slowly regrowing just like David's kidney. This confirms the alien object has healing powers. David tells Annabelle to take care of Zach and goes away in the truck. In the evening, the agents hear rumors about the alien object that fell at David's city. Lubinsky thinks they should be following orders and abandon the search, but Stipp is stubborn and announces they'll investigate this new clue. Back at the barn, Zach is having a panic attack as his PTSD triggers nightmares about his and Jim's limb loss during the war. Annabelle helps him calm down so he can rest. At that moment, David comes back with 2 tanks of cooling gas and announces they're taking Zach to the barn. Annabelle helps him move him, and David immediately puts the gas around the alien object to keep it fresh. Next, they sit Zach next to it, and the object immediately puts its vines around his arm, causing the leg to finish growing in seconds. Annabelle steps away from a curious vine reaching for her and passes out at the nasty sight of the leg. While unconscious, Annabelle dreams of being alone with her mother when she dies. She wakes up in the morning and discovers Zach walking outside with perfect legs. He can't believe what's happening and he's delighted. Then, Annabelle and Zach join David at the barn, where he's finished designing a bunker-like capsule for protection against an unstoppable tragedy. Annabelle thinks her dad is starting to lose it. He swears she can trust him. Afterward, David goes to see his friend Tony at the junkyard, but he only buys a small piece of metal. Then they go to the bar, and David tricks Tony into drinking until he passes out. He leaves Tony in his car before taking his keys, which he uses to enter the junkyard with Zach, and steal all the materials they need for the capsule. They even take a full mixer truck. Everything is taken to an abandoned factory where they can work in secret. While they drive through the forest road, they see the agents searching the area. The next morning, Tony wakes up and finds the keys in his pocket as usual. In the forest, the agents find the crater, but there's only a small alien sample in it. The local sheriff tells them to find David, explaining he crashed here a few nights ago, but didn't get a single scratch. The sample is taken to the lab, and the scientists explain that the alien object carries the DNA strands of various plants and animals, including humans. They conclude this is a living sample of abiogenesis, which is the natural process that allows life to arise from non-living matter. It precedes evolution. At the factory, David and Zach work hard on the capsule, which they make using the cement mixer and protect it with steel. They put the alien object inside to keep it safe. In the meantime, Annabelle visits Jane's grave and decides she needs to do more to move on. She grabs some of her mother's things and makes a pile to start a fire. But she's interrupted by the agents looking for David. The agents stay in the house until David comes back to question him. David lies and says he doesn't remember what happened after the car crash, only that he saw a light in the sky that made him lose control. Stipp reveals he knows about the regrown kidney and shows them pictures of the Mexican man, saying this guy had also thought he was healed. Now he's dead. David decides to take the agents to the barn and shows them where he used to keep the object, claiming that the sun melted it. The agents find a stain on the ground and pretend to believe David before leaving. Afterward, Annabelle tells David that this is getting too dangerous, but he refuses to accept it. He says Jane showed him a worldwide tragedy, and Annabelle snaps, reminding him that he wasn't there when Jane died, and that now, the object is manipulating his guilt. The next morning, David goes for a walk outside, and is shocked to see huge flames coming after Annabelle, but it's just a dream. The next time David goes to the factory, the agents follow him. David notices and calls a friend to ask for a favor while he starts driving in circles around town. Moments later, the agents finally manage to block his way on a road outside town, but it turns out to be David's friend. The agents are angry that they lost David and decide to use Annabelle against him. Meanwhile, Tony's boss has discovered his truck is missing and found the robbery in the security footage, but he can't see any faces. It's obvious that someone used the employee's keys though, so the boss orders Tony to get his truck back. At the factory, Zach is still working on the capsule and watches the vines grow inside it while he remembers the soldiers who fell with him during the war. When he goes home, Annabelle is there because she needs someone to talk to and shares how David stopped visiting Jane after the transplant failed. He was obsessed with working so he could pay for the treatments, and now she's worried that he may be losing his mind again. Zach promises to protect David before introducing Annabelle to Jim so they can explain there's a cure. Jim doesn't believe him, so Zach has to show him his regrown leg. Still believing it's a trick, Jim turns down the offer even though he's missing multiple limbs. On their way out, Zach and Annabelle are cornered by the agents. At the factory, David is visited by Tony, who found him because they used to play there together as kids. He freaks out when he sees all the stolen goods and refuses to lose his job over this, so he tries to call the police. David panics and jumps on Tony to try to take his phone. So Tony quickly retaliates by punching him. A desperate David kicks him off, and Tony crashes against the table before falling unconscious. However, when David takes a closer look, he's devastated to discover Tony hit his head and now he's dead. Hearing Jane's voice, David burns the body. Then he checks inside the capsule and discovers the vines have spread all over the walls, creating a living tissue. Suddenly he has a vision of himself dancing with Jane and admits what he did, saying he isn't worthy of salvation. Jane explains that it was never meant for him. The capsule is for Annabelle and Zach. At home, the agents are keeping Annabelle and Zach in handcuffs. The news keeps showing the state of the war, which has escalated into nuclear threats. Stipp tries using pretty words to make them talk. However, both of them stay silent and don't fall for his bait. Then Stipp grabs a fire poker and starts hitting Zach on his new leg. Annabelle tries to stop him, but she's easily pushed off. As Stipp begins to beat Zach up, David comes back and carefully sneaks around his house. He finds the pile of things Annabelle left earlier and finishes covering it with gas to set it on fire. The guards by the entrance inform the agents in the house, and Stipp sends Lubinsky out to investigate, guessing this is David's doing. Since Lubinsky takes the other two agents with him, now David can sneak into the house and threaten Stipp with his gun. He forces him to drop the handcuff keys and turn around, allowing Annabelle to hit him on the head with the poker to knock him out. After taking Stipp's gun and getting rid of the handcuffs, the trio escapes through the window. At that moment, Lubinsky comes back and hands Stipp his rifle, which he uses to shoot Annabelle with a non-lethal round. The guys shoot back and hurt Stipp before running to the car to escape. Stipp knows David will want to heal Annabelle, so he and Lubinsky immediately start following them. Lubinsky thinks they've crossed a line, but Stipp claims everything is fair to stop a nuclear war. During the trip, Annabelle tells David that Jane needs him and is waiting for him, causing David to have a breakdown. As soon as they make it to the factory, David puts Annabelle inside the capsule. Yet no healing happens, and he loses his mind again. Thinking he worked for nothing and hearing the agents outside, David starts throwing gas at the capsule and takes out his lighter, unaware that the vines are finally reaching out to Annabelle. At that moment, the agents come in and ask him not to do it. David refuses to put the flame out. However, he's interrupted by a healed Annabelle poking her head out. Now David turns his lighter off, only for Stipp to shoot him down. Lubinsky finally snaps and tries to stop his partner from causing more damage, but Stipp easily pushes him off. Two other agents try to sneak around the machine, so Zach shoots one in the head before getting stuck in a gunfight with the other. Stipp tries to join him, only for Lubinsky to shoot him in the shoulder. After a few shots, Zach manages to bring the other agent down. However, his shoulder also gets hurt. Suddenly, an earthquake hits the area, and a bright light appears in the distance. The first nuclear bombs are falling, and it'll only escalate from now on. People all over the country come out of their homes to watch the explosion, except for Jim, who used his medicine to self-delete as soon as he saw the news. In the factory, David tells Zach to take care of Annabelle before making him enter the capsule. Then he apologizes to his daughter for leaving her and presses a button to seal the capsule. As more explosions can be heard in the distance, Stipp begs David to open the capsule, but he claims he can't. At that moment, the alien object starts filling the capsule with water. At first, Annabelle and Zach panic, but as the water completely covers them, the object releases flakes that freeze the liquid and put the duo into cryogenic sleep. At the same time, David dies and sees Jane welcoming him to the other life. All over the world, nuclear bombs continue to go off. Eventually, the capsule opens up, and Annabelle and Zach awaken. Plants have grown over it and its metal is rusted, but outside the place is nothing but ruins, and it seems that centuries have gone by.